It's really important that we do the right thing, and we didn't judge it was the right thing to take offensive action in the Middle East. But with our assets, with our personnel, with our military, with our citizens affected now in the Middle East because of the Iranian response, it is important that we've made available our air bases, both in Diego Garcia, but also in the UK, for the US to launch that defensive action against Iranian targets. I think that is the right balance. We are supporting the US in that defensive action, but I think it is really, really important that we de-escalate what is happening in the Middle East, because that is in our national interest, and we will always act as a government in our national interest. So we are less than a week into the US strikes and the Iranian response in the Middle East. But of course, as a government, we are monitoring very closely. I'm in regular contact with finance ministers around the world, with the Governor of the Bank of England, and later today I'll be meeting some of the businesses who are most affected, particularly in the oil and gas sector. So we're doing all of those things, but what is unfolding in the Middle East shows how important it is to have returned stability to the economy, because a year and a half ago, when I became Chancellor, when the public finances were in a real mess, when interest rates are so much higher, when UK government borrowing costs were so much higher, we would not have been in such a strong position to weather the latest global headwinds. So what I've managed to achieve in the last year means that we are in a stronger position. I'm confident that we can weather whatever is thrown at us. We are a strong economy. We have security, stability built back into our economy. But of course, as ever, since I became Chancellor, my number one priority is to make working people better off by growing our economy, and whatever is thrown at us, that will continue to be my objective. The benefit of returning stability to the economy is that the Bank of England have been able to cut interest rates 6 times since I became Chancellor of the Exchequer, and that's only possible because of the stability that we've returned. We've got control of the public finances, got control of the economy, and as a result, those hikes in interest rates that we saw under the previous Conservative government have started to reverse, and there's been 6 cuts in interest rates. It's been the fastest cuts in interest rates in 17 years, and as a result, more people are able to start getting on the housing ladder. And it was great to meet a couple of people today who have bought their own homes, one just in the last few months, and one actually a few years ago, who, when he bought his first home, it was just before interest rates peaked. And obviously there's been that worry since he's got the mortgage about what happens when he remortgages. But because of the cuts that we've seen in the last year and a half, it means that instead of facing a hike in his rates when he comes up to renew, they should be settled roughly where they are now. And so that is the direct benefit of returning stability to the economy. In fact, we've done the calculations that somebody taking a typical fixed rate mortgage today would be paying £1,300 a year less than if they'd taken that fixed rate mortgage just before I became Chancellor of the Exchequer. So that is the tangible benefit, not just for first-time buyers, but also for people renewing their mortgages, that stability brings to them and their family finances. Well, the building societies are running a campaign called Think Again to encourage particularly first-time buyers to think again about whether they can get on the housing ladder. And we're at Nationwide in Stevenage today, but Nationwide have really been pioneering, along with some of the other building societies, helping more first-time buyers get on the housing ladder. And again, the 2 house buyers that I met this morning, first-time buyers that I met this morning, have benefited from both lower interest rates, but also have benefited from the fact that we've changed some of the regulatory rules to make it easier for banks and building societies to offer better mortgages, better products that better suit first-time buyers. Yes, we've seen home ownership decline under the previous government, and we've seen the age at which people can buy their first home increase. And we want to give confidence to young people and to families that home ownership is something they can realistically aspire to. And by changing some of the regulatory rules, we've really been able to help more people to start to get on the housing ladder. And I welcome the campaigns that the building societies have been running to encourage people to think again, because the truth is, over the last few years, when houses weren't being built, when interest rates went through the roof, when inflation got out of control, for lots of young people it wasn't possible to get on the housing ladder. But the stability that we've returned to the economy, inflation coming down, interest rates having been cut 6 times already, means that young people now can think again about getting on the housing ladder. But I also recognise that there are many young people and families living in private rented accommodation, and so this isn't a government that just cares about home ownership. We also are very mindful of people in the private rented sector, and that's why our Renters' Rights Act, which is now in force, it gives greater rights to people in the private rented sector. And again, talking to the first-time buyers this morning about their experience of landlords is very salutary, because there is a lot of insecurity for people who are in private rented accommodation, and we're trying to return some of that security to move the goalposts so things are stacked a little bit more in their favour. And that's particularly important when you think about the number of families who are in private rented accommodation who out of nowhere might find that their rent has gone up, or that their landlord wants to take the house back and rent it out at a higher price. And that is really difficult when you've got kids at a local school, when you're settled near family and friends. And so the Renters' Rights Act, as well as what we're doing to help more people get on the housing ladder, is all about making sure that this government is working for young people and for families. Under the last government, the number of young people not in education, employment or training increased by 113,000. And that was the legacy that was bequeathed to us when we formed the government a year and a half ago. And I'm determined that young people are either in work, in college, or on a training programme. And as a government, we've already put more money into further education. We're increasing the number of apprenticeships, particularly for young people, because apprenticeships for young people fell by 40% over the last few years under the previous government. So we want more young people to get on those apprenticeship programmes. But we also, in the budget last year, set out plans for what's called a youth guarantee, which is a guarantee of paid employment after a period of time if a young person can't find a job or a training place. And that's really important, because we know that if a young person starts what should be their working life on benefits, they're more likely through all of their life to experience bouts of unemployment, lower wages, lower confidence and self-esteem, mental health problems too. And we want to stop that spiralling for young people, and that means investing more in our young people, making sure that there are jobs and training places available. And say a bit more about that in the next few weeks, but already increasing the number of places at FE College, increasing the number of apprenticeships for young people is starting to make a difference. But this is a real challenge, and I guess the difference between the previous government and this government is that both of us faced a challenge. We're trying to do something about it.